Hey there everyone, Bob here, and welcome back to Gamer Nutrition. So we've made it to episode 2 now, or video 2. Today we're going to go a lot more in-depth into the science that I spoke about a little bit in my introductory video. I want to just spend some time really breaking down why I have chosen the keto diet, why I actually have high hopes for it, and so far, after 1 week, I've actually had some surprising results. Not so much the weight loss being surprising, but I'll give you a hint. Food cravings have been amazing, actually. We'll talk about that a little bit in probably the next video or the video after that. So, before we dive into this too far, let me be very upfront and very clear here. I am not a dietitian, I am not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, anything like that. I am just someone trying to lose weight, and I've spent about 2 weeks really diving into what I can find, digesting a lot of this information, and I can just offer you what I have come across and what so far seems to be working for me. Everyone is different. Your genetics are different than mine, your lifestyle is different than mine, all of that stuff, your stress level is different than mine. So what I'm going to be going over in the course of this video is one-to-one will not apply to anybody else out there in the world. You need to find what works for you. Hopefully you still find the videos helpful. I realize what I just said might mean, well, then why watch? Turn it off. Hopefully you still find it helpful, but what I'm saying is you have to do your own research, talk to your own doctors, talk to a nutritionist. A lot of general practitioners, doctors, this is not to knock any shade on them. They're great people. They tend to be doing a really good job. But as a general practitioner, they might not have the most in-depth knowledge of all the different dietary needs and all the things like that. You might want to actually talk to a dietitian, nutritionalist, something along those lines, in order to get the larger picture. It's also good that if you're going to be doing any major dietary changes, have regular blood work done. Keep an eye on your different mineral levels and all of those things, because things are going to change and you're going to have to keep an eye, know what you're doing, so you're not doing harm to yourself. You're focusing on the good. All right, with that out of the way, let's start. And the best place to start is just talking about our body and how we burn fuel. So there's 3 ways our body fuels itself, and they're what we eat. One is going to be sugars. Now, when I say sugars, I mean carbohydrates also. When your body consumes carbs, and I've gone over this in my previous video, but when your body digests carbs, it turns them into simple sugars, which end up in the bloodstream. So as soon as you eat anything solid, and for most people, a little bit of liquid, right away your body produces a little bit of insulin, and that sugar ends up in your bloodstream, generally via your intestines, and the insulin goes ahead and it takes the sugar. It works as like a little transit. It moves the sugar from the bloodstream into the cell and then takes the waste back out of the cell so that the cell can burn the sugar for energy. The more sugar you have, the more insulin is produced. And this is kind of what is going on with diabetics. I'm not a diabetic expert. I'm not an expert on anything, but why people that with diabetes have to inject themselves with insulin. It's their pancreas isn't creating the insulin needed. They're either not getting the signal to the pancreas that there's sugar in the bloodstream, or the pancreas itself can't produce the insulin. So they have to take an artificial source of insulin to use that sugar up in their bloodstream. If your bloodstream has too much sugar in it, it will convert that over into fat, as long as you don't have some other issues, like you could end up diabetic with it, or you could end up with, there's a term out there, I actually suffered a little bit from it, hypoglycemia. Hypoglycemia is another possibility based off it, where your sugar levels don't quite match up with the insulin production as they should be. We will talk about hypoglycemia in a video probably 5 or 6 from now. That is how sugars work. Sugar is your body's preferred method of creating energy. This is how it likes to power its cells. Now, when I say likes and preferred, that doesn't mean it's the best for it. It's just perhaps the simplest, the easiest. It's the least intensive way for it to actually create energy. So if out of our 3 options of sugars, fats, proteins, sugars is the easiest one to do. So if you give it equal parts, say your diet is 30% carbs, 30% fat, 30% protein, it's going to use the fat or the carbs the most every single time. That is just the way it goes, though it might not be ideal, and that is the whole concept behind ketogenic or ketosis diet. Fats. Fats, on the other hand, I didn't mean to just give the screen the middle finger. Whoops. All right. Fats are burned slightly different. Unlike sugars, which can just have insulin move them into the cell and the cell can directly burn it. We're talking your red blood cells and all of that stuff. Fats can't be done that way. In order for your body to use fat as energy, it needs to be converted over into ketones, done that via the liver. So the fatty cells get moved to the liver converts them over, creates a bunch of different byproducts, actually creates 3 different types of ketones, plus some other things. The ketones then end up in your bloodstream, and the blood cells can use the ketones then as energy. They can also be converted into glucose for brain fuel. They can be converted into glucose, or your body does create glucose because your body does need a little bit of glucose to run, but you don't need to eat bread. You don't need to eat glucose. Your body can produce some itself. And that is how ketosis works. It's fat cells to the liver breaks them down, turns them into ketones go to the bloodstream, the ketones get picked up by the cells use them as energy. The third one, the protein one, is one I haven't looked too much into, other than to know you don't want to be this way. Your body can burn protein as energy. It will convert it over into sugars. This is bad. Basically, you never want this going on, because if you do, it means when you run out of calories in your system, when there's no longer any sugars in your bloodstream, it will start burning muscle. It will start burning your muscle proteins down rather than the fats. So you don't want to do that. This is why you have to kind of be careful. If you just do a very high protein diet, you can be eating 85, 90% lean protein. And if you're on a calorie deficit, when you run out of that protein in your stomach, in your intestines and everything, there's no carbohydrates for it to pick up, and you haven't taught your body to burn ketones, it's going to start converting your muscles into sugars. So if you're a very high protein diet, which high-end athletes are, you have to make sure you bring in enough calories that you're never burning your actual muscle fibers. For people for weight loss, you don't really want to worry about this. This is for elite athletes that are really just worried about muscle building, things along those lines. That's kind of more their area. For us, we need enough protein to maintain muscle growth, to maintain our muscles, but we don't want to ever get into that state. Okay, so with that in mind, we then look at, say, the standard food pyramid, the 2,000 calorie diets, and all of that. And if you look at it, it's kind of what we're going to be doing, or what I'm going to be doing with ketosis. I keep saying we, but what I'm going to be doing with ketosis, or what maybe you want to consider, is basically flipping the pyramid on its head. With what I just said, if you look at the pyramid, at the bottom, you have 9 servings or whatever servings of bread, carbohydrates. All of that is sugar. Right above that, you have fruit, sugar. Then you have vegetables. Now, vegetables are kind of an oddball here. Vegetables are very good nutrition-wise. There's no argument here. A lot of vitamins, a lot of minerals, and on a keto diet, you're going to want to get a lot of vegetables. The vegetables, though, are also carbohydrate focused. I almost said high in carbohydrates. That would have been a mistake. If you look at your average vegetables, they are mostly carbohydrates. There's no fats in a vegetable. There's also generally very little protein in vegetables, or no proteins. The main structure of most vegetables is fibrous material, which is carbohydrates. So a lot of people on the surface, you'll look at that and be like, well, then you don't want to eat vegetables. That's not true. If you take like a standard size cucumber, you might be looking 300-400 grams. That entire cucumber might have 12-14 grams of carbs for the entire cucumber. So that one large cucumber would be about as many carbs as you want to eat in a day on a keto diet, but that's just that. And cucumbers are actually kind of higher. If you look at something kale, your lettuce, celery, a lot of them, they're still primarily carbohydrates, but the amount of carbs per mass is very, very low overall. So vegetables, carbohydrates, sugars, but small amounts per volume, I guess you would say. From there, you get onto your meats and cheese, or your meats, poultry, fish. Now we're starting to get into fat. Finally, we're getting into actual fat being eaten. That would be burned in ketosis. Then you have your dairy, and then you have your oils and fats and stuff. So that's your normal diet. And as you can see, if you follow that, you have a lot of sugars in your body. If you're someone that's only looking to lose that 5 to 10 pounds, that's perfectly fine. That small window in the night between then and the morning, where you're in ketosis, 3 a.m. on, that'll be enough to burn a few pounds here or there over the course of a month, 2 months. If you're in a calorie deficit, you will lose that weight. For someone like me, though, that's looking to lose more close to 100 pounds, that's a long, long, long road to go down. So the idea is flip that pyramid upside down. Use the fats, the oils, all of that stuff. Get the body always in that ketogenic window. Take that little 3-4 hour window that is going on overnight and make it the whole time. Make it 24 hours. That way, every time you eat and then your body's out of calories, out of sugars and all of that, it instantly goes right back into producing the ketones and burning the fat. And that's the whole concept of it. In order to do this, there's a bunch of different ways. This is where I mentioned earlier a little bit, intermittent fasting is something that can be going into. Let's just start with, move intermittent fast to the side for a moment. I shouldn't have brought it up. So a ketogenic diet is all about the ratio. Rather than let the time overall and then calories put us into that ketogenic diet, what we do is we just lower the carbohydrates, we lower the sugars down to 5%, maybe 10% of our diet. Bring that number down, bring the fat up, keep the protein at about 25%. But when we get our fat up to 65, 70%, and we have our sugars, our carbohydrates down around 5%, our body will, over the course of a couple days, couple weeks, maybe a month, month and a half, will say, all right, I am not getting the carbs I need, so we're going to stop focusing. I'm going to stop prioritizing sugar as my number one source of energy. I am now going to prioritize ketosis, as my number one form of energy. And whenever that changeover happens, at that point, you never come out of it. You can go ahead and you can have your vegetables and all of that, and there's going to be carbohydrates in it, but you'll put 10 grams of carbs, 8 grams of carbs, depending on all the vegetables you eat in your body, and your body will consume them. It will create insulin. No matter what, you create insulin. I keep going here because your pancreas, no, that's actually down there. This is thyroid. That's a different conversation. No matter what, when something goes into your stomach, a little bit of insulin gets produced. No matter what, those carbohydrates in your stomach, in your intestine, do break down into sugars and end up in the bloodstream. So a little bit gets used up. But as soon as it's gone, it's right back into the ketos. It doesn't take a couple of hours for it to be like, hey, I need some carbs. All right, I'm not getting them. We're in keto. You just go right back into it. And that is the keto flu. Some people you will hear talk about. I've been unbelievably lucky. 1 week in, no real keto flu at all. Do I want to start doing the updates yet? We'll do that for the next video. I'll talk a little bit about that in the very next video. For this one, let's stay on the science. So that is the point of the ketogenic diet. You just keep that window going as much as you can. There's pros and cons to this. Someone like me looking to lose a significant amount of weight, mostly body fat weight, very good thing. If you're someone pregnant, nursing, looking to get pregnant, you don't want to be on a ketogenic diet. That's very bad for you. You need that other nutrition, you need the sugars and all of that stuff for the child, for the embryo, all of that thing. Somebody with diabetes, this is a flip of the coin. Some diabetics find very good results with ketogenic diets because you're no longer relying on the insulin. So you can go this way. You don't need to worry about taking the insulin. You have to really work with your doctor on this. Do not take my word on this one. Talk to your doctor if it is something you're going to consider. It varies, I think, depending on type 1 and type 2. Also, one of the big horror stories, if you start looking into the research about ketosis, is diabetics going into, I forget the actual term, but it's kind of like a diabetic shock because of the ketones. They can actually get so many ketones in their bloodstream that it becomes acidic and it causes a whole bunch of problems. They're different. The ketones that are actually in the blood are the same thing, but they're being produced for different reasons. On the diabetic side, they're being produced because the insulin is having issues, because your pancreas is having issues, and you end up producing a lot more. If you're someone that doesn't have diabetic issues, you can go into ketosis and it's not dangerous at all. If you are diabetic, talk to your doctor. It honestly may be a very good thing for you. It could make you not need to take insulin. It could correct a lot of your problems, but it could also put you in a whole lot of danger. So be very cautious about that if you're diabetic. If you're someone that does a lot of very heavy workouts, see, I did a lot of endurance workouts, bike rides, walks, things along those lines. But if you do a lot of burst exercise, weightlifting, interval training, things along those lines, ketones are very good long-term aerobic energy. They last quite a while. They provide consistent energy, but they don't provide very good boost energy. So if you're someone doing something like that, you're going to need carbs in addition to that. You're going to need sugars. There's a lot more going on there. So this is not a great diet, or at least a great meal plan, if that is what you're trying to do. Intermittent fasting would probably tie in better for that type of lifestyle, along with a somewhat more traditional high calorie or high carb, low calorie, low fat diet. We'll talk about that here in a moment. And I think that's most of it. Pregnant, diabetic, athletes, yeah. So those are kind of the thing. You got to figure out what window you're in. Also, if you're someone that's only looking to lose 5 or 10 pounds, you probably don't need to throw your diet all out to get rid of the breads and things you might really like in order to try ketosis. You will lose the weight normal. If you are in a calorie deficit, that small window of 4 or 5 hours at night over the course of a month or two is going to be enough for you to lose those 4 or 5, 10, 15 pounds. This is more for someone like me that is trying to lose significant amounts of weight, or someone that is really pushing for that last couple of percentage of body fat. But they know a lot more about it than I do, so they're not watching this video. Okay. So that's the whole science, or the basis of the science behind it. The last thing we're going to talk about very briefly is intermittent fasting. And I'm doing both. I am doing a ketogenic diet combined with intermittent fasting. They are not one and the same. They don't need to be used together, but when you combine the two together, you're probably going to get your best results. We've already gone over the ketogenic, but intermittent fasting basically takes the fact that shrink that window where you're eating down as small as possible. So rather than eat at 8 o'clock in the morning, at noon, and then again at 6 p.m., and then maybe have a snack at 10 p.m., rather than do that, put all of your calorie intake into a 12 or ideally an 8 or maybe even a single hour window. So there's the most common one that I've come across is 16 and 8, which means 16 hours, no eating at all. Don't eat any food for 16 hours. Then in that 8-hour window, you want to consume your caloric intake for that day. You want to take in your 2,000, 2,200, whatever your caloric focus is for that day in that 8-hour window. This way you can, 5-6 hours after you've finished your caloric intake, your insulin's going to have gone through, your blood sugar's going to have gone through, your sugar's going to have dropped, and you're going to go into a ketogenic state for about 12 hours, give or take, depending on what's going on. So you can do intermittent fasting with a standard diet. If you're someone that's looking to do that real heavy exercising like we were talking about before, what you can do is right before you go out for your workout, you start your window. So maybe you want to do your workout at, say, first thing in the morning. You want to do it at 7 o'clock in the morning. You get up at 6, you can load up with a little bit of carbohydrates. You go get your workout in at 7 o'clock. You come back, you do your thing, and then you eat your final meal at 2 in the afternoon. Hopefully I got 8 hours there, right? 6 and 6 is 12. Yeah, 2 in the afternoon, and be done at 2 in the afternoon. And then from 2 in the afternoon until 6 in the morning, you don't eat anything. You can have coffee, you can have green tea, things like that, but you don't want to be taking in milk, you don't want to take in soda, anything with sugars in it you want to stay away from because it's going to cause that insulin spike. That's an entire possibility. Now, if you look at this, you take the two of them and you put them together, the ketogenic diet plus the intermittent fasting, what you have is you have a diet that maximizes your ketosis or your keto production. You end up with this point where when you have 16-hour window where you're not eating, but when you do eat, you're only bringing in 5% of it as carbohydrates. So even though 5% of your diet is carbohydrates, even though you're bringing them in, you're not ever coming fully out of the keto production. You stay in it the entire time. So at that point, you have a 24-hour window of keto production. Likewise, if you're someone that has real trouble not being hungry, like if you have a tough window going 16 hours without eating, you can do ketogenic without fasting. As long as you're staying under your carb limit, if you're keeping your carbs low and you're keeping your fats high, you'll stay in ketosis. Now, you will get intermittent insulin spikes all that time. So each time you eat, no matter what, you're going to get an insulin spike. And that insulin spike is going to lower your HDH production. And it is also going to lower your keto production. It probably won't stop it, but it is going to lower it. So there you go. That's kind of the basic rundown of it. I think that's a lot of information. Again, I'm going to stress very much. Not a doctor, not a nutritionist, not a scientist. Double check everything I said. I will put a ton of links down below. I am going to link someone called Dr. Eric Berg. I'm going to warn you up front. The guy wants to sell you some stuff. So he has some really good information I found out there about intermittent fasting and ketosis. He does some great videos, breaks down the science better than I can do here, which are great for watching. And I found that by and large, 95% of the information he's put out in those videos seems to be accurate. It seems to be correct. There's always a little hesitation for me though, when at the end of those videos, he wants you to buy his supplements. He wants you to buy his electrolyte powder. He wants you to buy his different things over there. It doesn't mean, maybe he could very much be just a really good doctor who's using the things he's producing. He's trying to make the best product for you. That's entirely possible. He also could be trying to make a buck. Now, it's not all just him. I've collaborated a lot of his evidence with other things, but all that will be in the links down below. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm starting to get dry throat, so we're going to wrap this up. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll try and explain things a little bit better. There will be more videos coming. Until next time, though, this has been Bob. Thanks for watching.